Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings and salutations as always. We are back talking about Andor, episode 2, The Nothing Continues.
It's really irritating how we've got things to say, but at the same time we've almost like what is there really to talk about?
Um, well, funny you should ask. We do have a few small things to cover. We kind of had to sift through a lot of crap to get these points, but nevertheless, so once again, this episode kind of takes the established lore set up by Rogue One and further assassinates Cassian Andor's character. If this is supposed to be the young, diverse, swashbuckling rogue, a Juan Solo, if you will, uh, he's the worst rogue ever, like of all time, and I mean this absolutely in the medical sense of the word. He might be retarded. Why? Would you like to elaborate on why we think that this man is stupid?
Yes, so he gets home to I think what is a mother figure, and we find out that basically the warrant's been sent out for his arrest, and she just goes, "Oh, I thought people know that you're from Fest." It's like that's what all my documentation says. It's like, what about off of it? Well, I've told some people. Like, there's just people I've talked to. I don't know, and it's like, what? What do you mean you don't know? That's
So
some
so
vital
basically
information.
basically the real life equivalent of what he just said is like, well, if there's paperwork involved, like legally, as far as the government is concerned, I'm from Fest. But if I'm just like talking to somebody on the street or whatever, I'm not secretive at all that I'm Canary. I think is the appropriate term. I keep
Yeah,
saying Gorlami as a
yeah. We
joke,
say
but
yeah we say Gorlami because that's that's just
I
funnier.
I can't be fucking bothered. Like it genuinely hasn't really mattered that much in the series.
Yeah,
But yeah, basically he admits to going around blabbing to every Tom, Dick, and Harry he meets that the planet he actually claims to be from, he's not actually from.
yeah.
Which
The line specifically is like we've always said you're from Fest. Every doc I've submitted says you were born on Fest. But there's, I don't think so. But people, yes. Who? I don't know how many. And it's like, oh my god.
yeah, like you would think if this is your cover story, if you are living in secrecy, you would take that pretty seriously.
You'd stick to that.
You would stick to that. You would make sure. So, uh, as far as that particular scene goes, um, I know some of you may be confused when we're like, well, we assume this is where he lives and we assume this mother type figure. That's as much as the show gives us. It's genuinely confusing. This is the first time we've met this character. He doesn't acknowledge her as mom. Um, all of their dialogue is weird. Like it's and we've seen that he doesn't always. So that's as much introduction as we get to Mark. It's weird. Like I'm trying to care or be invested in any of these characters or anything that's happening on the screen, and the show seems to go out of its way to prevent me from doing that. So it's frustrating to say the least. There are multiple characters that get introduced in this episode that we either don't know their name, we don't know how they're connected to the story, we don't know how they're connected to characters that we're supposed to care about. It's weird, very weird. Um, I guess from there we can talk about the we get more of those flashback sequences. So I'm beginning to see um kind of a recurring format of how the show is going to work. We're going to keep having these flashbacks every episode. So we have like an A plot and a B plot. And once again, they do the same thing with the flashbacks where we don't actually know what anyone is saying. So it's all just visual, and they were in fact going to investigate the downed ship. Um, how does that go? Why? How does the downed ship?
So it goes about as well as you would think it goes because they see that there are two bodies just hanging out, and this lady just tries to investigate a little bit of the ship. Didn't she checks to hell and back if one of the guys is dead, but not both of them? And that leads to the second guy just getting up and just fucking shooting her in the back. That leads to everybody fighting off this guy with a blaster with what looks like blow darts. And what's
Yeah,
kind of
so apparently those sticks that they were carrying were
they're blow
blow
guns.
guns.
And I find it
Um,
rather odd, like, because we find out later that their planet was fell victim to an imperial mining accident. That means that somewhere on that planet is probably a decent, like, well, no, we see it. We see a decent chunk of imperial tech just hanging around. So they would honestly,
yeah, I mean they show him looking over like a quarry.
yeah, which has equipment still there. So them being completely puzzled by this ship feels so weird because I would assume they've been scavenging from this kind of stuff quite a lot. This just happens to be the most recent capture that's literally dropped into their lap.
But the weird thing is, they go to investigate the ship. Girl boss McBossington, who made sure he was allowed to tag along, is being really tactically stupid in her investigation, and she gets shot and presumably, either seriously wounded and or killed. Um, and then everybody, like, once they down the guy with the blaster with their little blow darts, which takes a substantial amount of darts, so clearly those are not super effective.
Yeah, they're
Um,
not poisoned or anything. They're just
yeah, I don't know. They're just he gets hit with like a dozen before he actually goes down. Anywho, they immediately go and like attend to their lead and pick her up, and then just start to deuce out and leave. And it's like, are you not gonna investigate the ship that you came all this way to investigate?
yeah, like half of you guys could bring her back to whatever the camp is, but you still got a job to do.
Yeah, like you still came out here for a purpose, right? Like you're gonna scuttle the ship or scavenge it for parts or
Yeah,
weapons or food or I don't know anything.
yeah, because
Nothing. Nope. We're
it
all
was
just gonna
quite
turn
a
around.
it was quite a trek just to get there.
Yeah. And now apparently we are taking our wounded leader and retreating back to camp. And that was that flashback. But again, we don't have any meaningful dialogue or anything, so we don't really know how this personally affected Cassian. He's just kind of there,
We
and
know
and he
that
looks
it,
at the ship.
and then he clenches his fist. Yeah, he's like, oh, technology.
Oh, the bad ship killed my leader. It's like, okay, it wasn't the ship, but whatever. Um, there's also kind of like I wouldn't even necessarily call it a B plot, but there's a minor subplot going on with Mr. Tim with two M's and Cassian's friend Bix. So we see more of their implied relationship. They are clearly in some form of situationship, where they're at least sleeping together, if not actually together. And so Tim got mad and reported Cassian to the authorities. But even though he is fully aware that Bix is working with Cassian and was trying to hide the notice, so he knows, it's like now he feels guilty all of a sudden turning Cassian in. And I guess the best argument I could give the show is when he turned him in, it was implied that he was at least, tipsy or drunk. But it's like, okay, so he got tipsy, drunk, whatever you want to call it, called the cops, went home, and then Bix showed up at his home and they slept together, and now all of a sudden he feels it's like, okay, I guess I kind of don't care.
Yeah, because what's oddly enough is I I don't know how I feel about the fact that we're almost rooting against our main character. But
Yeah, speaking of which, we get more of the company guys this episode after Tim reports him, and their scenes again really fucking good. Like I like the company guys. They are unironically the best characters in the show. Um, you can tell that the writers are trying to say that these are clearly the bad guys, but it's funny how much you wind up rooting for
especially because
because
they're really competent.
yes, they are very competent, even compared to Storm. Like the sergeant guy, especially, is like really doing a good job of like breaking down their orders because they're on their ship, heading to the planet. And, okay, men, like here's what you need to do. We're gonna be safe. We're gonna take precautions. We're gonna be smart. We're gonna minimize collateral damage. Like we're gonna be careful of civilians. He's really laying it out there, and it's like, dude, this guy knows his shit.
And that's even like, and that's just on the ship. Remember when they got the file on Cassian, they bring up like, oh, he's done this such and such crime. They got an image, but then they did the super smart thing of bringing the lady from the brothel to
Yeah,
confirm it.
I was actually about to be like, oh my god, they're all are going to recognize because no one's actually seen him. But no, they actually brought in the chick from the Bra episode one, and it's like, oh yeah, she would be able to recognize what he looks like. So bam, like they fixed that potential plot hole before it happened, and I was like, oh, that was really competent of them. Really well done. It's like, holy shit, these guys are acting like really kind of menacing and threatening the way that Storm should. But then you have the line where it's like the sergeant gives that big rousing speech on the ship. And then it's like, okay, then he kind of hands the floor over to the officer. I think his name is Karn. Like that's the first time I've heard him have a name. And it gets really cringy. And I genuinely, if this is done for comedic purposes or if they just want to show you how incompetent this guy is. But it's frustrating because based on everything we've seen up to this point, we know that this guy is really passionate about solving this case and bringing this murderer to justice. Like he's trying to be a good guy. He's trying to do the right thing from his perspective. And it's definitely something he's clearly passionate about because remember, his superior told him to drop it. But he gets his first shot at power and he's like, "No, I'm going to do and what I believe is right is to solve this crime."
Yeah, and there's a
And
conversation between between him and the sergeant on it's like, oh, half measures.
yeah, him and the sergeant are absolutely on the same page that this is the right thing to do, which is what makes their scenes so good. But then it's like they he gives him the floor, and to be fair, the sergeant did give a hell of a rousing speech. Kind of hard to follow that up, but he gets up there and just has like the cringiest, most like impassionate, just cliche speech ever.
Yeah,
It's got
he
like no
chokes
energy.
essentially.
He chokes hard. And it's so bad, like you can even see the troops in front of him, like physically wincing from how bad and cringe this speech is. And then they do that whole like when he finishes his speech, there's like that clap afterwards,
Uh,
and it's like, oh, just can we not, man? Like it would have been funnier if they had done the hot fuzz thing and just been like, oh, what he said, and literally just reiterate what the sergeant had already laid out there. The sergeant did 100% handle that whole everything that needed to be
and I
said.
and I feel like that would have gotten a laugh out of the men, which would have endeared us to them a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, he tried to compliment them, but just because he was kind of choking at the same time, it really came across as like less than genuine, which I mean, those kind of men, those kind of they can tell when somebody's bullshitting them, and that's clearly, how they were reacting to his speech. So that's unfortunate. And it just sucks because it's like, man, I really like the dynamic between him and the sergeant. I really like characters. Like every time we have a scene with them, they're getting shit done. They're doing the right thing, and it feels really cool. But then it's like they do something like that where they're just intentionally trying to rob the wind from sails. And man, can we just stop? Like let him be an imposing, threatening bad guy because he's doing it. Like he's trying to chase down Cassian. He's trying to bring a murderer to justice, and it's
Yeah,
like
it's
I'm
and
unironically rooting for them.
yeah, and it's like how you brought up perspective. It's at the end of the day, to these people, they're cops and their colleagues, like the two people at the beginning of episode 1, they were murdered. And so their whole thing is bringing a criminal to justice. And that's something that honestly we've only gotten like bits and pieces of this from like things like Mandalorian. What was it like to actually live underneath the Empire? Like what?
Well, we're
And
kind of getting some of that now, but
but
it's
it's being
weird
like,
hit and miss, and it's tonally borked because it's like we have those moments where it's serious and we see them trying to be competent and effective cops, and sometimes they genuinely are, and it's really impressive. It's like, yes, more of that, please. And then it's like they have the moments where it's just like I don't, like I said, I can't tell if it's meant to be comedic, but they have those like really cringy moments, and it's just like, man, quit doing my boy dirty like that because he has a potential to be a really good villain. I mean, in this case, honestly, it feels like he should be the protagonist, but neither here nor there.
it could be a
Um,
nice foil to
yeah.
Cassian. This guy
Well,
stands
exactly,
for
because
order.
Cassian is like the swashbuckling rogue, and this guy is like the by the book Boy Scout. You know what I mean? So naturally, their two archetypes do clash, and they could have a lot of an interesting dynamic going on there. But every time where the Boy Scout should be able to shine a little bit, they take that away from him, and every time Cassian should be struggling a little bit, they make him succeed because reasons. It's really backwards.
Yeah, it's gonna frustrate me if these two should ever actually meet and have a conversation. They're just gonna make Cop Man choke again and make Andor win the conversation. When, from what we've seen from Andor in most of these conversations, he's in the wrong.
Yeah, like not unironically, he's in the wrong most of the time. Not only with like the murder stuff, but even just when he's talking to his um his like friends, or I guess if you call them like comments, his contacts, his crime underworld contacts. He's clearly spent many of his hours burning these bridges, but yet for some reason they're still willing to do him favors. Like when he goes to haggle with the guy, and the guy's like, okay, it's gonna be 900, and he's like, oh, you give me a real number. I've got five, and it's like that's not a real number either. And even the guy's like, the guy brings up multiple valid points about how he's asking to go today, short notice, and don't ask questions. It's like, yeah, that's a tall order, dude. You're gonna have to pay for that. Like, people aren't gonna be willing to haggle with you if you're making those kinds of demands. Like, you're asking him to do you multiple big favors. But also, it's confusing because, like, we have the storyline with Bix where Cassian is trying to sell this piece of equipment on what is essentially like the black market for, a lot of money, and she's setting that up. But then at the same time, he's doing this deal with this other guy where he's trying to like get off world, I guess, even though he was already off world last episode. It's we don't really know what he's doing. We don't Us as the audience, we don't have any real clue about what his plan is or what he's trying to accomplish or what his goal is, other than I guess currently he's just trying to avoid capture.
Yeah, he's trying to avoid capture, and with that whole getting off world, what's weird is it's kind of just a common thing with Star Wars. Taking a ship doesn't seem to be that hard.
No.
Like in the first episode, he's swapping out parts, and that alone should take quite a bit of expertise. It's like how like driving a car is relative skill here in the real world, and for them that's this like them flying a spaceship is the same as to us driving a car, and that's really weird because that's a lot more different variables when flying. It's it's always been odd to say the least. So it's like
Yeah.
why can't he just take a ship? There's a whole parking lot full of them, and they don't seem to be under lock and key. Most of the doors just seem to be open.
Yeah, it's really strange.
And then the last few minutes, we get introduced to Stellan Skarsgård's character. We don't even know who he is or what he does. He just we see him. That's literally it. We see him, and he's in a scene where some random guy talks to him, and he barely talks back.
Well, and it felt like more of that thing where like a lot of the dialogue, while it was kind of helping to push, I'm going to use heavy air quotes here, the plot along, it didn't really tell us anything about the characters. It didn't really give us any new information about the world or what's going on. Like this is a lot of things are happening while at the same time nothing is happening and we're being told nothing is happening. Like it just doesn't feel like the ball is really moving forward. It's kind of going back and forth, but it's not actually going forward. Side to side, maybe, if we're being generous.
Or just hovering in place.
Yeah, just hovering in place. It's like it's doing things, maybe, but I don't know. Maybe it's more of that whole we'll find out next episode. Maybe that's why they released 3 episodes at once, was so that we would have to watch all three. But it's just I really feel like you shouldn't have to do that. I mean, both of these episodes were like 45 minutes, 40 with, if you factor in the credits. Like we should have a good idea by now of what the plot is and kind of at least a general direction of where things are going. We don't. I couldn't, like, I can tell you some names of the different characters, but how they're actually relevant to the story, how they matter to the plot, how they matter to our main character, couldn't fucking tell you. And that to me is a hallmark of very poorly written storytelling.
It really is.
So we will continue to suffer on this journey. We will watch the next episode and present to you our findings once we have watched all three. But yeah, so far, if I was going to say yay or nay on the recommendation, I'm still leaning heavily towards no. This isn't your time.
I'm still leaning towards no as well. This feels like
Like,
an insane waste of our time. If you act like in the last minute, you kind of snapped for a second, just like as it was showing the conversation in the ship. You're like, "What is this massive waste of our fucking time?"
oh, you're doing some static there, sir.
Oh, did it my? Oh yeah, my. How's that?
Much better. Jesus Christ.
That was weird.
Yes, no. So yeah, it introduced a new character. I say introduced very lightly because it doesn't at all tell us like who he is, what he's after, what he's doing. It literally feels like every scene he was in this episode was a complete waste of time because I don't even know who he is. Like I can't tell you his character name, I can't tell you what his motivation is, what he's trying to accomplish. Is he after our main character? Is he a friend or a foe? Don't know. And it's like that's really poor storytelling. I'm sorry. It just is. So We will dive back into the sludge that is
Yeah.
Andor, and hopefully, if slash when we resurface, we'll have some more information for you. Wish us luck, ladies and gentlemen.
Bye.
Bye.